Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Stephen Young. Steve is the director of our newly created School of Environment, Enterprise and Development. He is also a professor in that school, having earned his PhD from University of Toronto in environmental engineering, and then having worked in the private sector, running his own consulting company, environmental consulting company, for 15 years before he joined as director of the school. Steve, in your hands.
Thank you. Well, this is very exciting. This is fabulous having Seed launched today. We've got the sunflower banners up. We've got fabulous people. We've had an excellent introduction. Thank you, Deep. Thank you to the Minister. I want to also acknowledge we have an online audience. This event is being broadcast, and I'm hoping that the online audience is receiving this, and I welcome them as well. That's why we're speaking into our mics and relaying that to them. For my panel, which is really, really exciting, I have 4 distinguished panelists. In your program, there are short biographies. I refer you to those biographies for more details on these individuals. I will, however, introduce them very briefly right now, and I want to get into some questions here and some answers to those questions. So starting from your left, we have Sandra Odendahl. Sandra is Director of Corporate Environmental Affairs for RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. Then we have Frank Frantiszak, who is a member of the Order of Canada. He is a former Vice President of Noranda Inc., a mining and forestry company from years ago. We have Toby Heaps. Toby is President and Editor of Corporate Knights. And we have Olaf Weber. Olaf is the new Export Development Canada Chair in Environmental Finance, and a colleague of mine starting January in Seed. He's coming to us from Austria. And I welcome Professor Olaf. So today, for about an hour and 15 minutes, we've posed a number of questions around the idea of, is green enough? And within that, we want to explore some questions of, isn't it just enough for a company to pay its taxes? What about additional social responsibilities? Are those required too? Are we really moving forward on sustainability as a company, as a community, as a nation? And at the end of this session, I'd like to see some action items, some items for change that we could send to our political and business leaders and say, here's some things that we'd like to see that need to be done to affect some positive change. So I'd like to give about 5 minutes to each of my panelists, and then open it up a little bit and have some discussion amongst the panelists. I hope to moderate this, and I'm sure there's some good ideas and some useful thoughts that will come of this. So, Sandra, looking to you first, is green enough?
Thank you very much, Stephen. All right, well, I guess there are 3 questions embedded in the is green enough question. I think to answer the question briefly, no, green isn't enough. I think that the framework that really is effective and the framework we should be talking about is more of a sustainability framework. Green is never enough on its own. It's not enough in business, and I don't think it's enough in society. And I think that a more useful way to look at it, and very much in the spirit of the new Seed school, is that it's about a balance. And the balance shifts all the time. It depends where you are in time, it depends where you are geographically, and it depends where you are in the development curve. but it's about economy, it's about environment, and it's about social good. In Canada, we have the luxury of being a very wealthy country, so we don't have to worry about where our kids' next meal is going to come from, and maybe it's a time for us to put more of an emphasis on green, but that may not be true for people in other parts of the world where owning an automobile is a distant dream for the next generation. So I think the answer is green is not enough. Green is very important, and there's no single answer. It really depends on time, place, and development. Do you want us to answer some of the other questions in that, or will you come around later?
Well, if you have a few more comments now,
okay.
This is a good platform.
Okay, sure. The second thing that you talked about is how far should companies go in including social programs, and what are their duties in development. And again, I think that the answer is it depends. I don't think there is any one answer for these questions. These are very complex questions, and they're very specific to the time and place that you live in. So how far should companies go on social considerations? I think it depends what sector you're in. It's a very different issue for a mining company developing mining in, for example, in Indonesia or in a remote part of Canada versus a telecom company based in Vancouver. The kinds of social considerations that you put into your business will be very different and will have very different impacts on your own company as well as on the communities around you. And I think the third thing that you talked about is paying taxes enough and preventing pollution. Well, I think those are really important, because if you're paying taxes, it means that you're making money, which is a good thing for a business. It means you're providing employment, and you're providing a product or service that somebody wants. So actually, that's really important. And if you're doing that while preventing pollution, I think you're a long way towards serving society. But it's probably not enough. And again, it depends on your business. But I think that a useful context for businesses and probably for policymakers, and I would say the interests of business and the interests of policymakers overlap, but they should not and are not the same. I think the degree to which you look at your responsibilities should depend on what your stakeholders want. So if you are running a business, you have to look at serving your stakeholders, and absolutely shareholders, but also clients and employees are probably, at least in our business, the three top stakeholders. And then there are all your other stakeholders, the general public, the activists, the people who aren't clients, but you would like them to be clients, and so on. And so I think that your responsibility as a company is to serve your stakeholders, ensure positive economic impact. And also I think that there needs to be a boundary between what companies do to serve society and what governments who are democratically elected should do. And while those interests overlap, they should not replace each other.
That's a very balanced perspective you're putting there. No, it's green is not enough. We need the social, we need the economic. Frank has, in his role at Noranda Inc., provided some leadership both to the mining and to the forestry sectors when the initial ideas of sustainable development and environmental responsibility were formulating. And Frank, around these themes of is green enough, what are your reflections, what are your thoughts today?
It's very simple. It's very interesting that the question is actually asked 20 years after the Brundtland Commission report was published. And the report, as you know, came with the sustainable development concept, and it has three elements: economic, social, and environmental. So my answer to this question is no. Green is not enough, the same as Sandra's. However, before answering the second question, are we moving forward on sustainability, I'd like you to consider a few observations in all those three areas. Economic. You know, we led the financial system to get close to the complete collapse. I think that has a very detrimental impact on the economy, individual private sector, etc. And not only that, it's not over yet. very prominent macroeconomist, Hernandez de Soto, in a recent
Bring that a little bit closer.
in a recent interview, stated that they are still looking for and listen carefully, $250 billion of toxic assets. Nobody knows where they are. So wait until they find it. Corporate innovation culture is almost non-existent. If you look at the major corporations, I think that the culture is the same as 10, 15, 20 years ago. We have to change that culture into innovation. I'll come to that when I make some advice provide some advice to CEOs and the Prime Minister. We must look for opportunities in green sector. The global does not mean Buffalo and vicinity. It really means global, and it means that the world is willing to do business with us. I don't know why we are not going out to China and India and other developing countries where the business is. On the social side, paying taxes is definitely not enough. It is important, but it's not enough. Corporate social responsibility covers a number of other elements, and I am going to, because of the time, mention just 2 or 3. Employees. Look at the employees. Look at the safety records of our companies. I think that not a single company has a goal zero injuries. I think that we all say that our people are the best asset, etc., but we do very little for it. We must develop innovation cultures, change the culture of the company into innovation culture. In the head office, you usually have maybe 20, 30, 40 brains. At the workplace, you have 20,000, 50,000 brains. And those brains are the same. They can produce and innovate the same way as the head office. In communities, I think that the communities must be treated as partners. Companies operate with their consent. So I think that you have to consult, communicate, and inform. Very important stakeholder are the NGOs. I think that most of corporations consider NGOs as a nuisance, I think. But I think that they really truly play a very important role in the society. We have to work with them and treat them as equals. Once you do that, you establish trust, and you have a very good cooperation and advice. That's very important they come up with. On the environmental side, are we green? We are on the way to be green. Different segments of society have reached different shades of green. Public. Opinion polls are up and down, as you know, but generally public, especially young people, are greener than any other segments of society. I am not going to mention examples, but one is important. Very recent commentator on CBC News made a comment on climate change. At the end of that comment, I thought we are facing an ice age. I think that he completely ignored melting ice at the poles. It was laughable, but it's not laughable because I think that people watch and listen, and some of them take it seriously. Corporations made a progress in environmental performance, but most of them still think that environmental performance is detrimental to their bottom line. I really disagree with the minister's triple bottom line. I think it's one bottom line. There are no triple bottom lines in the annual reports. It's one. One is associated with the other. If you do badly in environment, you do not do that well in economic sense, as well as in the same as well with social. Corporations. So I really think that environmental performance must be a driving force for innovation and enhancing the competitiveness. At the Toronto board, do I have still a minute?
No.
No? Oh, that's it.
We'll definitely pick you up again.
I just would like to tell the audience that I have in my last part, I have advice for the CEOs and for our Prime Minister, and that will be very interesting.
Yes. No, we all want to talk to the CEOs and the Prime Minister, and that's part of the purpose here. Toby, we've heard from two, a corporate leader, a former corporate leader who's thinking more broadly. Now, your perspective is coming from what direction?
Well, we're called the Canadian Magazine for Responsible Business, so I guess we're a bit of a more of a pusher than a waiter in that respect, though. Yeah.
So, what do you reckon?
I guess just like to preface my comments, I feel like on this table of esteemed panelists, I feel like a bit of an imposter. I guess on that question of is green good enough, I think it's pretty obvious that it's not. But I would also go farther and say a siloed approach to green is not green enough. For example, Amory Lovins, who's quite a respected energy economist, has done a lot of work recently with the U.S. Pentagon. And now the U.S. Pentagon has amazing energy-efficient, munitions-guided lasers and cruise missiles, and they're greener than they used to be. And some would argue the carbon footprint goes down when they take out a factory. But there's a lot of collateral damage involved in that approach to reducing emissions. But then when you look further, come to our company, it's really interesting looking at the big behemoth company, which is Walmart, the most employees, most sales in the world, larger than many countries. And they've calculated, they know what their emissions are in terms of their direct emissions from the freight and from their stores. But what's way more interesting is what their emissions of the products on their shelves are, because those are made in China and exported. And really, we're just exporting a lot of our carbon emissions to places like China, and then we import the products back here, offshoring our emissions. And Walmart's calculated that their annual emissions, if you calculate the emissions of everything on the shelves, is actually 220 million tons of carbon dioxide a year, which is a pretty phenomenal amount. Canada's total is about 800, so it's sort of over a quarter of what Canada's total emissions. And ExxonMobil, for reference, is 140 million tons of direct emissions. And so that's a huge amount of carbon. And what's interesting about Walmart, and there's a lot of questions on the social side for Walmart for sure, and that's part of the motivation, I think. But what's interesting is they're starting to use their power in the supply chain and relationships with tens of thousands of producers of material goods, and they're starting to put pressure on them and say, okay, if you want to sell on our shelves, this is part of the criteria. If you're use excessive packaging, if your factories have a higher than average emissions intensity, then you don't sell on our shelves. And by the way, you have to meet the Walmart price. And so it creates a challenge, but Walmart doing that, you can't tell your biggest customer to go bugger off the same way that you might try to tell the regulator when they're looking to do something. So that's interesting. And then even looking, we have Sandra here from RBC, the largest financial Big Five bank in Canada. And RBC is for certain a leader globally in clean energy finance, especially out of the European operations, but here as well. But then you look, and now RBC is starting to look at perhaps more fulsome reporting of their carbon intensity of their investments in Canada's big and growing industries, including the oil sands. And I think it's a matter of time, and Olaf might have something to say on this with his perspective from Europe, before our companies start to have a more fulsome life cycle accounting of their green side of their business, not just sort of the direct sort of. I mean, who really cares if a bank has their executives driving hybrid cars? It's nice, but it's really about what the bank is financing. And so I think, and that's where the real risks and opportunities lie too. And where I think we're starting to see some evolution there. So that's encouraging. I would say in terms of other things beyond green, so green not being good enough. I think Sandra and Frank touched nicely on it. There's a sort of the various stakeholders. You have to serve your community, the environment, your employees, your investors. Everybody hears those repeated. On the tax question, is it paying taxes good enough? Well, I think most companies are finding creative ways not to pay their taxes. The U.S. General Accounting Office found that 2/3 of large corporations pay less than 5% of their statutory tax obligation in any given year. So companies like PepsiCo, on many occasions, pay zero taxes net using creative accounting techniques. And those types of loopholes are closing because of the deficit situation governments are finding themselves. So I think that kind of approach, manufacturing false cash flow in effect, is becoming a risk. In terms of just sort of the bigger picture, why Canada, why sustainability, why this approach, what's the point? Well, we have 9 million people, we're on our way to 9 million people on this planet, we have a finite amount of resources. We have to figure out how to use them more smartly and intelligently. And why Canada? Well, what's interesting about Canada is we've been leaders. We've invented many things, not just basketball and zippers and the space arm, but there's all sorts of things. There's a book called Canada First of all the great things that we've been first on. Usually they get commercialized in another country, the one south to our border. So I think that's the opportunity. But on our TSX today, we have more clean technology companies on our Toronto Stock Exchange than any other stock exchange in the entire world, 122. So that's a real opportunity to sort of build those kind of companies up. And then on the energy side, people know we have oil sands, and I'm from Alberta, so this is kind of an interesting topic for me. But we also have amazing deep geothermal potential, the magma below the Earth's surface. And Australia is on a project to tap 5,000 megawatts of their deep geo, going down as far as 11 kilometers, and getting the steam, the molten energy to make steam above ground. Lots of technical challenges. But it's a beginning of the pipe, amazing source of almost unlimited energy. And in Alberta, if we know how to do anything, it's drill. So it's a huge opportunity. And all this money we're spending on carbon capture and storage, if we were to take that and put it into enhanced geothermal, I think in a matter of a decade and a half, the oil sands would be a rounding error on our exports of energy to the United States.
Wow. Okay. Geothermal, oil, Alberta, clean energy, taxes, China, Walmart. Okay. Try and capture some of this. Maybe Olaf will give you a chance to make some sorts of this yourself.
Yeah. A lot of things are already been said, and for me the question is clear. It's not enough to only be green. In all my research I've done, I concentrate on sustainable finance, not on environmental finance. And for me, it's a triangle of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And we also always stress the financial and economic part of sustainability, especially in the financial business. This is one of the most important parts. For me, one of the most important things is that you integrate sustainability in all the business decisions. It's not a kind of an add-up to your business, like doing financial business, doing banking, and then additionally maybe building green office buildings, and what Toby mentioned as well, having nice cars for the management. And it's to integrate sustainability issues in your risk management, in your risk prediction, in loans, in investment, in asset management. And it's also, then you have a nice win-win situation. It's a lot of those risks what banks are in are caused by environmental problems, social problems. And so from my point of view, there's a lot of opportunity to do it. It's not a kind of burden to do sustainability. It sounds like a bit.
So let me just catch that though, because Sandra said it's a balance between these things, and Frank said he doesn't like triple bottom line. He wants the one bottom line. And now you're saying integration. Yeah. So integration between social. So is that the same thing? Is that the same message, or is it a little bit?
Integrate, but we have to have a kind of a threshold. We have a kind of a limit. We can't go beyond. For example, in environmental issues, it's easy to maybe to define in the mining business, or it's harder to do that in banks. But there must be some basic levels that have to be accepted for the business to have the license to operate your business.
Okay. Okay. Sandra, you seem to be responding to what he's saying just from your notes and smile there. Is that a fair representation of the way a business like yours would tackle it?
I think that we definitely, we've been practicing, I guess, integrating sustainability into finance for a long time, and I completely agree with the comments that Olaf made about how it needs to be integrated into risk management, into provisions, into asset management. So actually, I agree with that. I think that the challenge is when, I think maybe it's a little more about what Toby said, where there seems to be, in some quarters, an expectation that banks should account for the environmental impacts of their clients. And that's where I think you start to blur the line between what's the responsibility of governments and society and what's the responsibility of business. We certainly examine the environmental aspects of our clients, as should, well, I don't know actually whether other corporations do that. I don't know if car companies ask their clients, we'll only sell to you if you promise to take the subway most days. I mean, I don't think so. Or I'm not going to sell you this, or I'm not going to give you this credit card because you might use it to
So your organization does do that.
Well, no, we don't ask people if they're going to use their credit card to guess their number. So we do actually look at where environmental issues drive risk very much. We've looked at carbon and climate change in our portfolio, and we look at social issues. So yeah, we do it. I'm not sure if we do it to the extent that folks who are not in banking, I think that maybe we should, and it'd be interesting to hear what we would do with the information if we did do it.
Well, Toby wants to jump in. I know Frank gave me the eye there too. So, and then back to Olaf.
I don't want to appear that I'm sort of trying to create your brouhaha, because RBC has been such a leader in clean energy finance, and also I think the first Canadian bank to do a board-level presentation on climate change risks to the board of directors. But I would say, and I know that maybe there was some internal debate about this before the numbers were made public, RBC does claim credit for $5 billion or so of executed financial mandates to enable clean energy. So I think if you take credit for enabling the good stuff and reporting the good stuff, I can understand why you'd want to do that and maybe minimize the explanation of the enabling the sort of the stuff that's a little bit more environmentally controversial. And I do take your point about company disclosure ultimately has to be determined probably by a regulator. But I would say one of two things that RBC might want to consider to be consistent. One would be if you're going to take credit for the good stuff on the disclosure side, to also disclose the other stuff, or if not, then to accept that companies also have a responsibility in determining what they influence what regulators will ask for. It's not just a price taker situation, especially with a company like RBC, who's arguably Canada's most respected corporation. If RBC says this stuff should be disclosed, then it will be disclosed. The regulator will start to call for it to be disclosed. So I'd say the shoe is a little bit on, it's on both feet, but I don't think it's entirely on the regulator's foot.
And just to define this, so by disclosure, you mean disclosure to whom?
So disclosure to shareholders, information including the carbon implications of the portfolio, the loan portfolio, across all financial mandates, but starting with the loan because that's the most material to the bank's shareholders.
Can I respond before?
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, I hope this isn't going to be a let's beat up the big bank, because because then I actually have a lot to say. But yeah, I think that I agree actually about disclosure being a good thing, and I do think that we have a lot of regulations around disclosure, and we're very open and not apologetic about financing Canada's resource sector. I mean, it's what drives Canada's wealth. It's it's what makes us a wealthy country. It's why people are able to give $52 million to universities and so on. I mean, we have an entire economy that where resources are very important, and RBC is very proud to support the Canadian economy. And that includes a whole range of sectors. And so we actually disclose, I don't know what the bad stuff is, I have an indication of what you might be talking about, but we actually disclose our exposure to all the sectors. It's in our annual report. We tell people when they ask for it. So I don't think we're hiding that. I think that what's interesting about asking financial institutions and any large company to disclose what their clients are doing is where do you stop? So why just carbon? I mean, this happens to be what people are interested in now, but we have 17 million clients. Some of the people in this room are clients, and in aggregate, the emissions from people driving cars and heating their houses and so on, arguably, we do mortgages, we finance buildings. The emissions, if you're only interested in carbon, the carbon footprint of our 17 million clients is Canada's and maybe part of North America's carbon footprint. And surely we aren't expected to disclose that or try to calculate it. I do think it should be calculated and disclosed, but maybe not by us.
But there's a difference between calculation and disclosure and assuming responsibility.
Right, but I don't even think we could calculate it, and we certainly wouldn't assume responsibility. And then I guess my second point is, yes, some people carbon is extremely important, and climate change is something we take very seriously, but you know, there's other kinds of pollution. Yeah. So should we do this for every kind of pollution? I mean, I just don't know where the slippery slope will stop. So you kind of have to figure out what is the reason for doing it.
These expectations are changing.
Yeah.
And information flow is increasing. But a company is still a company. Now, Frank, you know, you mentioned, Sandra mentions oil and gas and how their RBC finance is monthly external.
I'm not going to go into details on any sector
because
we would need much more time for it. I'll tell you just one thing. There's a direct relationship between performance of the company and shareholder. If the shareholders, if a company wants to do well in environmental and sustainable development, the shareholders must be putting pressure. And the banks. Banks are not out of it because we've been discussing this on various panels before. And I have a case, I know of a case when a German bank refused a loan of $450 million because the technology, the way how that process was handled was not proper. There were social costs associated with it. And the company had to change the technology. So the lender, the banks have enormous leverage how to improve performance of the corporations. And I think that shareholders and the banks, without them, the private sector will not advance as fast as we would like to.
Okay, let me take it back to Olaf, because we have recruited him as a professor in sustainability finance, and we're touching directly on this.
Yeah, I'm often confronted with that argument, we are not responsible for our clients, and of course, banks and insurance companies are not regulators, that's for sure. But let's look on it from the other way. I did a project with it's a small bank in Switzerland, and it's a kind of ethical environmental bank, and they were eager to disclose all and to report all their clients' relations, because their clients that they financed in the alternative energy sector, renewable energy sector, had in the average had a lower emission than a standard company in that sector. And so they are eager to report that. So it's in the annual report, we financed in that and that sector those companies, and the CO2 emissions are at the average much lower than if we had financed conventional energy projects. And it went so much in detail that it then could show that every 100,000 of francs or Canadian dollars you put in that bank as a savings or an investment, you could in 1 year you could reduce your own CO2 emissions. So also the clients could see what is the benefit that the bank is giving to society. So let's not only see the negative side, now we have to do that and we have to be responsible. Everybody wants us to be responsible for the clients, but take it the other way and say, we are responsible for our clients, and we are proud of that, and we are reporting that, and we are bringing some benefits by our credits, our loans, by our investments, by our asset management.
We have in the audience here some experts. I noticed one person from CICA. And I think that the bottom line is actually that we have to find a process how to evaluate economic value added by the sustainable development performance. If we do that, mutual funds as investors, the banks, and everyone will be jumping up and down with pleasure, because they will have a measure how to evaluate different companies and their major projects.
Is that reasonable to do, to evaluate?
I tried 10 years ago to get together some prominent economists and accountants, and I didn't have too much success because they were preoccupied with other important things. But I think it's now time. I think that Dr. Feldman has been involved in that a great deal and has a great knowledge.
Larry Feldman, another new professor at CU,
Yes, right.
has developed a
So I am hoping that your university will be the leader in this and recruit people like Mr. Willis and others who have been involved in that for years now.
So Toby, what if you were to do something? What sort of information would go into it?
Yeah, well, I think Sandra's right. Where does it stop is a tough question. I think maybe the better question is where does it start? And I think we'd all agree the elephant in the room is carbon. And it's not just carbon emissions of the companies that have been loaned money, the portion of the emissions that are financed through that, but it's also the avoided carbon emissions of the new energy finance or the energy efficiency retrofits of buildings, which is a huge opportunity for where banks can probably make among the largest impact, economic and environmental. So I think starting on those things, but in terms of how do you expand it and what is the lens you look through, I think it's the financial relevance lens. So you look at which factors are likely to be most relevant to each particular sector, and then that's reported, because nobody has the power to get that information as much as somebody who's learning.
Well, we have existing reporting mechanisms that are similar to financial reporting. We have a mechanism called the Global Reporting Initiative. We have an initiative called the Carbon Disclosure Project, which captures quite a number of organizations. Aren't those doing that?
Well, the Carbon Disclosure Project does a decent job, but analysts who look at it say 67% of information is useless because it's not apples to apples, and it's not a common disclosure framework that's being enforced on. They just disclose how they want to disclose to a non-profit organization.
That's right.
So that's a huge problem. GRI is a nice starting point, but it's so big you almost lose the forest for the trees.
Because GRI has how many indicators?
Well, it depends if you include the sector-specific indicators, but we're talking in the hundreds.
Hundreds of indicators.
Yes.
And what does a financial analyst do with that?
Nothing.
Nothing, yeah. Financial analyst wants a few indicators, a few smart ones.
Yeah. What's a smart indicator that a financial analyst is?
Well, Scotia Capital did a really interesting report looking at the water intensity of the oil sands. And it's not about do we not finance the oil sands, it's about how do we finance the most efficient companies in where we want to do the financing. And the reason why it's a financially relevant indicator is there's only so much water allocation that are available in that basin. And there's chances that companies will have their production shut down, and it's already happened in the past few years for days and sometimes weeks on end, which has a huge implication for their cash flow. So if you're really water efficient, and the interesting thing is sometimes people think all oil companies are the same. Well, they're not. Within the oil and gas industry, there's many industries, the resource industry in general, there's a factor of about 30 between the best performing company and the worst performing company in terms of how efficient they use resources, whether it's water or carbon emissions. So there's a huge range that is quite financially relevant in many contexts.
Frank?
About 12, 13, 14 years ago, I did a complete survey together with Swiss bank colleague, global survey of financial institutions, banks on all continents, if they can spell environment and sustainable development. And it was very interesting survey. And we found that Europeans are much more advanced than North Americans, and we found that North Americans use environmental management system implementation as a measure of overall management practices. I think it would be, by university, perhaps very useful to repeat the survey and see if there was a change, a positive change, and maybe take it from there.
So, Olaf, you're fresh from Europe. yesterday, 2 days ago. Do you see that?
Sure that there is a difference between Europe and North America, but it's not, you cannot say those are better, those are not. And what the difference is, if you go to in Germany, if you go to a conference where the environmental experts of banks are, for example, and then there are only those, and they never speak to someone in the bank who's really responsible for credit management or investment banking. And that's a big problem. There's a lot of expertise inside the bank, but it's not getting into the real business, and that's the advantage in North America. They are more interested to get the knowledge directly in the business, or they don't do anything if it has no meaning for the business. So there is a difference between different parts of the world, but we have to learn from each other. And another question was on the analysts there as well. It's a problem. The data that is provided on environmental, social, sustainability, performance for the analysts, it's not done for them. So we as environmental guys have to think about how can we produce some indicators that they are using, are able to use as well. It was quite interesting. I was in the asset management department of a big insurance company, and I introduced some management systems and some data, and the guy there asked me, how often do I get them? Once a day, twice a day? So they are not used to have a report once a year and use their data. They want to have,
because the financial people are getting that information.
Thinking in short term, they get secondly.
They got that earnings information every day, every quarter. And Sandra.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, is this on? Yeah. I think the interesting point that Olaf brought up and that's coming out here is about information and about integrating sustainability into business and into financial services. You know, there's two kinds of data. There's the kinds of data that, for example, socially responsible investors or people whose mandate or whose goal is to judge companies on their social and environmental performance because they're interested in it. And then there's the data that actually affects risk, that affects the value of the asset, that affects the ability of the company to grow, the ability of the real data that analysts look at. So I don't think it's a case of financial analysts and credit risk managers not getting it. I think it's a case of they're getting a lot of information that is designed for people who are interested in socially responsible issues or investing, which is, maybe it is the whole CDP report and the entire GRI and big, thick CR reports with fluffy bunnies and happy children. But the, analysts are very, very, very smart people. A lot of engineers from Waterloo and other universities go on to be financial analysts. They're not, it's not that they don't get it. It's that the sustainability data that is out there is not designed for them. And Blair and I have had a lot of conversations about that. And I would also suggest that some of the desire to see banks disclose all kinds of detailed data about what their clients are doing. We actually know a lot about what our clients are doing. We know a lot about their carbon emissions. We know exactly how much varies price of carbon, what it's going to do to our individual clients. We know what it's going to do to our portfolio. We know what it's going to do to sectors. We know lots about this. When we do a credit analysis, when we make sure that the bank, when we do what we need to do to make sure that Canadian banks are strong as they are, we take the information that is important out of that and we factor it into our analysis every day and every decision. But some of the information that folks would like us to collect does not actually feed into that. And I think what folks would like to see is really, I am worried that it is about banks, and maybe other corporations are going to feel this pressure, but doing the job that really should be done by market pricing. For example, if there was a $100 a ton price on carbon, we wouldn't need to have a lot of these conversations because that would show up in the balance sheet, it would show up in the cash flow statement, it would be on the bottom line. There wouldn't be people collecting data for some reason and maybe putting it in their CR report. It would actually be a financial metric, just like the hundreds and hundreds of others. So I think you need to distinguish between data that's interesting because you care about society and the environment, and that's important data, and there's data that actually materially impacts financial performance and credit risk, and they're not the same.
Okay, that's an excellent point. I think that's an excellent point. Distinguish between those data that are material to those financial decisions. And I think I heard agreement on the panel here that the current data that, for example, the Global Reporting Initiative provides is not really designed for analysts to make those decisions about the material. And Frank is shaking his head, and
No, that's very
Toby's
true.
nodding, but I think
No,
they're both
agree.
agreeing.
In agreement, yes.
Now, you just said something about the job of the market. And Toby, I think, is that what you were responding to a little bit there?
In terms of agreeing that if we put a price on carbon,
Oh, yeah, okay, price on carbon sort of thing? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, the price on carbon, what's interesting in the US is a lot of the legislative action for price on carbon has actually been driven by Wall Street. JP Morgan was one of the main sort of initial instigators. And back in 2006, they allocated 50% of their government relations money to lobbying in DC to get a price put on carbon, because they recognized that they were making investments and they couldn't be responsible to their shareholders and to long-term trends that were going to decimate their shareholders' long-term returns if they didn't have a price on carbon. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And here in Canada, TD financed quite an interesting report that came out last week, probably the most rigorous public report on how Canada could actually meet our 20% target and what kind of carbon price it would take. And that really helped to, I think, deepen the debate. So there's big opportunities on the research side.
Is it limited to a price of carbon, though? What about a price of water? Or what else?
Yeah, water. I mean, there's some municipalities. Edmonton, the more water you use, the more you pay per unit of water. Whereas in every other municipality, the more water you use, the cheaper it is per unit. So that just full cost accounting is a really good idea. And the time is fast approaching. The nice thing is that it's all about internalizing externalities. And the mother of all externalities, for sure, is carbon. And we're on the cusp of near global carbon price, I would say, in the next 3 or 4 years. So that's a huge, huge leap for sustainability.
Hola.
Yeah, we support it. If you look on a lot of studies, and even if you look on the positive ones, on the relation between environmental or sustainability performance and financial performance, you're lucky if you find maybe 10 to 20% influence. All the rest is influenced by different things. And that's in credit management, in investment for share prices and all that. And we have to keep that in mind, that we cannot explain all company and all firm success by being sustainable or not. That's a bit of a danger. We're always talking about that between experts in that field. So it's important to get more and more environmental issues integrated in the real accounting.
Frank?
Yes, I fully agree. I think that we don't have 3 silos, we have only one. And there are 3 components very much tied all 3 together. I'd like to comment on Sandra's comment saying that those analysts are very smart people. I agree with you, they are very smart people, but with tunnel vision. Problem is I sat on a number of boards of directors, and when we negotiated hundreds of millions of dollars loans, not once environment and social responsibility was brought in. And I had to bring it in. I had to tell them what we are doing, this and that. And I think it should be the other way around, because they know what are the risks, not addressing those issues. Mr. Chairman, we really discussed the banks at depth. Could we switch to politicians?
Well, I was... Do you have something to say to the Prime Minister or to the leader?
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh.
This is your pleasure.
In instructions, we got 3 questions. The last question was advice to CEOs and Prime Minister. I am going to omit CEOs because I think that we perhaps touched some of those. But my advice to our Prime Minister is as follows. Please continue vigorously to enhance the environmental quality. That has been traditionally main topic. Develop at least a 20-30-year vision for Canada. We have no visionaries in politicians. We don't have visionaries even in the private sector. I don't know where did they go. Fishing or skiing.
Fishing.
In doing that vision development, engage the public. The public must buy in. Otherwise, it's a plain useless exercise. If we do business as usual, you will allow Canada to be attacked from all directions for our resources, including water, and livable place. Or you can make Canada a superpower of the 21st century. And I am referring to climate change. Mr. Prime Minister, the train has left the station. There will be climate change if we want or not. Only one thing we can influence is the degree of change. To control climate change, we must control three things: our emissions. Second, desire of people to reach high standard of living. And three, population growth. And this is extremely difficult. For example, if we, in North America and in Europe, cut our emissions of greenhouse gases by 75%, then by 2050, globally, we will still be emitting about 50% more than today. This means that there is no way you can stop temperature increase. So some parts of the planet will not be livable. Those people from those parts will be moving into areas which are or will be livable. Those parts, many scientists identified Scandinavia, British Isles, Russia, New Zealand, very southern part of South America, and Canada. And I bet Canada will be the preference for these people to come to. There's a very good book which is titled The World is Curved. You remember a book, The World is Flat, by Thomas Friedman, excellent book. But this is a book dealing with curved world. And it was written by a very prominent American macroeconomist. His name is David Smick, S-M-I-C-K. He has 3 pages of references for his book, which are full of names we know, but we never met them. They influence the financial and economic situation all over the world. When his friends asked him what will be the title of the next book, so in the epilogue, at the end of the book, so you read the book, it's a very well written book. You learn about the macroeconomics, the relationship between the US, China, and everybody else, etc. So if you are going to be...
What's the title of the next book, Frank?
I'm coming to, yeah.
30 seconds.
Okay.
So I want to give everybody a chance to close here too.
His new book will be New Canada, a Scenario for the World 2030. Basically, he says that in little more than 20 years from now, top 50% of American and 1% of Chinese investor and innovation communities, literally tens of millions of people from the most affluent people from these countries will be living in Canada. Those percentage translates into 30 million people. And remember, 20, 30 years. So he's an American, he cannot say, well, this is the fact I researched. He's saying it in a half-joking way. But if you look at some other authors, like Green Dyer on CDC program, which is titled 3-hour program, Climate Wars, you will get the same impression. If you read James Lovelock, his Gaia, exactly the same conclusion. So, Mr. Prime Minister, are we, Canada, ready? Do we have an adaptation strategy? We do not have too much time. So
and on that.
wait. So decision between being a Prime Minister of a superpower or being Prime Minister attacked of the country attacked from all directions is yours. Period.
Okay, so, no, that's a great message, Yeah. Thank you, Greg. And clearly there's elements of leadership and innovation and preparedness and adaptation in your message. Toby, we'll go to you, then Olaf, and we'll give Sandra the closing.
Sure, I guess just big picture, Lord Nicholas Stern's outlined one single metric. It's not a silver bullet because it's a large metric that we can all aspire to, and if we can do it within the next 20 years, globally, Canada, China, companies, provinces, cities, individuals, if we can all do this one metric, then we're on track to hopefully live in a hospitable planet and make sustainable uses of our resources. So the metric is factor 4. Basically, what it means is we have to increase our resource productivity by a factor of 4. So we get 4 times as far on the same amount of gasoline, it's 1 liter of gasoline. We get 4 times as much heat out of the same amount of 1 unit of energy. Increasing our resource productivity by a factor of 4 puts the world on track to being sustainable, even with projections of growth in places like China and India. So that's the big term kind of thing. I would like to think back to hockey. So if we were going to ask Wayne Gretzky to look at this from a hockey perspective, he would say, okay, that's where the puck is going, factor 4, especially with 9 billion people on the horizon in this planet. So if we want to skate towards that puck, how are we going to sort of get there? And I think to start with, the first thing is our time perspective is so skewed to the short term that so many things that make so much sense, financially, environmental, social, don't happen. Al Gore noted a recent survey of US CEOs who said, if I could make an investment with a rate of return that exceeded a normal rate of return in increasing our building's energy efficiency, but it would have a negative impact on the next quarter's results, I would not do it. 80% said I would not do it. So our economy is so focused on what's in front of us that we can't see what's really important. So the best way I think to do that is to look for inflection points. Michael Porter, one of the most respected business professors, his inflection point is we should change the capital gains tax structure. So if you want to play the investments, it's a long-term investment where you put the money in a company for a long time and hold it there 3, 4, 5 years. Then when you make your return, you get to keep almost all of it. But if you want to play it like a casino, then you're not going to get to keep too much of it. And that would have huge ramifications. Al Gore's investment firm Generation, they have a 5-year time horizon. They don't even get paid from their clients at less than 5-year intervals. So there's no pressure for them to tell companies meet your quarterly returns. They're looking for a 5-year return. Yeah. So important. That's the most important thing, I think, the time perspective. Number 2, finance is oxygen, and there's all sorts of creative finance mechanisms that banks, that insurance companies, that pension funds, that government bonds. I would say green bonds, though, is a big idea. There's a great site called greenbonds.ca that's laid it out. Big problem with green bonds is where do you get the collateral from? And I think we could look at if you make the collateral contingent on property taxes. There's some really interesting models in the US where we could unlock literally trillions of dollars to invest in our building infrastructure over the next couple of decades. So that's a huge opportunity. Information is sunlight, and as we talked about here, we need good information, but not too much. We need smart information. So that's going to the people that make the decisions, the analysts, the ones that get this stuff, not just sort of any analyst, and getting them to help to contribute on what metrics should be reported in a clear, mandatory, outcome-based way that's continuous and comparable across sectors and within sectors. Infrastructure-wise, our clean energy is only going to come on board if we can tap it. Most of it is beyond our current grid infrastructure. We've had innovations in electricity grids over the last 20 years. Now we can transport electricity 2,000, 3,000 kilometers, losing only 3%. So we can go and tap this immense wind and hydro and geothermal if we have the proper grid infrastructure, but it's going to take a large investment on the order of a national railway that Sir John Macdonald pioneered so many years ago. And then, of course, the mother of all externalities, moving forward with the price on carbon. And I think if we could do all those things, we would be skating in the direction that Wayne would approve of.
Wow, thank you. Olaf, give it a try.
I just want to stress two points out of the 5 I thought about. One thing is that we should not only look on the high tech, on new energy sectors, but we have to find the solutions for raw material sectors, for mineral extraction. They are used, they are earning money with a high amount of emissions in the environmental world, but if nobody would use their products, then they wouldn't.
And they're important to Canada.
So they are important to Canada as well, but even a bank or a service sector companies is depending on their products as well. So we have to find a solution also to foster their sustainability. It's in the direction that the Minister Tony Clement said in the morning.
Good point.
Not only to look on not the knowledge industry, but the other industries there as well. That's one point. And another for the financial sector, but also for the other ones, is to be transparent. You can have a very nice environmental sustainability report as a bank, as a big global bank, and that's nice, but if you have trillions of poisoned assets that are not disclosure, that nobody knows about that, then people do not have confidence in you. And I know some sustainability rating agencies that don't recommend big banks anymore because they say we are not able to oversee the risk. And so one thing is stressing or concentrating on conventional industries, make them more sustainable, and the other one is to be more transparent, so to get that confidence.
Transparency and metrics again. Thank you. All right. And Sandra, we started with you, so
Thanks.
It's fair to end there too.
Okay, so if I had to put together a checklist for political leaders, I think I have 4 things. Number 1 is based on my observation that I do agree with Frank that for business there is only one bottom line, and it's important for how social and environmental factors feed into that bottom line. But actually for society there is a triple bottom line. And that leads me to my thought that sustainability is a very useful framework for policymakers. Because as a policymaker, as a national or provincial leader, you should be looking at how are you going to balance economic, social, and environmental interests of our nation. And that is a very difficult job to do, I'm sure. There's also the short term versus the long term. So what might be ecologically sustainable in the long term may be economically painful in the short term. That is a challenge for leaders. I think that we should expect it of them. We should hold them to it because there is a triple bottom line for citizens. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think that the fact is that some green business practices are still painful for business. Not all green business practices are in fact economically viable, at least not at the moment. They are a sacrifice. Some businesses do them, and they are thinking long term, but the bottom line is it's a case where many of the green business practices I'm thinking of are ones where the cost accrues to the business and the benefits accrue to society. Businesses do them because they do see benefits or because it's part of their contribution to society, but society may or may not reward them, customers may or may not reward them. So for policymakers, I think this again points to the need for using markets to internalize externalities. So if you do something good for the environment or society, there should actually be a financial benefit to doing it, and that means making it expensive to pollute. Things that disposing of CO2 in the atmosphere shouldn't be free, etc. But it's not just about carbon. There is a lot of other kinds of pollution out there. We're very focused on carbon. It's critical, but there are other things. Third thing is measuring success. I think, I know that Paul Martin started this project years ago and it sort of disappeared, but maybe Stuart Smith will touch on it, but the National Roundtable of Environment and Economy had embarked on a project years ago to look at something to augment GDP. So measuring the progress of society by GDP is very focused on that economic piece of the triangle. What about the rest? I think that leaders should look at how are we measuring success in our society And it isn't just economic success, because we hear about the other things, and we need to come up with some better indicators. And then my fourth and final point is about climate change. And I think someone touched on this, but I think that one of the things that is important is, yes, innovation is critical, but we have to remember that the solution to climate change is indicated by numerous studies. McKinsey has a really excellent one, but so does the International Energy Agency, the IPCC. Other groups have demonstrated that what you need is actually massive deployment of pretty basic stuff. Eliminating deforestation, a huge investment in energy efficiency, things we already know how to do. It isn't just about waiting for some technological magic bullet to save us from ourselves. We actually have to deploy things. So my fourth challenge to leaders is to be honest with citizens and voters, because it's actually going to cost money. If you internalize externalities, somebody has to pay. And that means that individuals who vote and who are citizens and who will benefit are actually going to end up having to pay a bit more for things that they say they want. And I don't know if it's easy for leaders to be honest about the cost of investing in this much better future that considers sustainability more fulsomely, but it's time for some honest conversations on that topic. That's it.
Very good.